In the previous movie, we saw where to find the settings for the different user roles in Contribute, as well as how to create new user roles. And we did that all under the Users and Roles category of the Administer Websites window here. In this movie, we're going to talk about how to assign and customize permissions for user roles. So in here, we have the user roles that are currently available for this site. Again, Administrator, Publisher, and Writer are the three default roles that are always created for all sites. And the Copy Editor role is the one I created in the previous movie. So to edit a role settings, you just select it and then click the Edit Role Settings button. And this takes us into the Edit Copy Editor settings. And there are 8 different categories of settings to customize here, starting with the General category, which is arguably the most important category, because it's here where you decide whether or not this user role is allowed to publish files to the website. Now, I based this role on the Writer role, which is not allowed to publish by default, so this Allow Users to Publish Files checkbox is unchecked. But I'm working on the Copy Editor role I created, and as the site administrator, I know the copy editor can be trusted to fix the work of the people in the writer's roles, so I'm going to allow copy editors to publish to the site. That way the Publish button will appear in the editing toolbar for anyone in the copy editor role. Now you can also change the description here to something more accurate. In this case, maybe something along the lines of copy editors check the work of the writers and have permission to publish pages. Now you can also change the home page for users in this role, which is useful if you want certain user groups to have a different page open for them automatically when they connect to the site. For example, maybe you have an interns group and you set up the intern role to use the press release page on your site to be their home page because the interns are assigned to maintain press releases. So for example, if I had interns at tcloud.com, I might want their homepage to be tcloud.com/PR or whatever that folder happened to be called. Under the Folder File Access category, you can specify whether this user role has full access to all files in any folder of your site, which is by default, allow users to edit files in any folder is checked, or if you want to limit this role to only editing within specific folders. Again, as an example, maybe you'd only want an interns user role to have access to just the press release folder. So you would click Only Allow Editing within specific folders, and you could select the folders you wanted the interns to have access to. But since I'm working on a copy editor role, I want copy editors to have full access, so I'm going to leave Allow Users to Edit Files in Any Folder checked here. Down at the bottom, you can also determine whether users in this group are allowed to delete the files they have permission to edit. So I can check that if I want to allow those users to delete those files. If you have rollbacks enabled, you can also check this box, which deletes rollback versions of the pages when the user deletes the page. Now, you might not want to check that just in case the user accidentally deletes a page, so you can get the page back should that happen. The next category here is editing, and it's got a lot of options. The settings here determine what actions users in this role can perform on non-template pages. Under the General Editing Restrictions category, you can choose to allow unrestricted editing, yet still protect scripts and forms from being changed, which is generally a good idea. You can also prevent users from inserting and editing images if you don't want users in this role adding non-approved images to the pages. Or you can limit these users to just text editing and formatting if you want to be very restrictive. Since copy editors are generally going to be editing other people's work, they probably won't need to edit the layout of the pages or anything else. So I'm going to limit them to only text editing and formatting. Under paragraph spacing, you'll find an option to determine what happens when users in this role press the Enter key while typing text. This is the same option Contribute questions you about when you first choose to administer a site, and we saw this earlier in this chapter. Your choices here are standard word processing, basically one line as in standard word processors, or 2 lines as in web page editors. If you want there to be a space before the next paragraph, which as we've already seen is called a paragraph break, you would choose 2 lines. If you prefer no space to appear, which is how most word processors work, you can choose 1 line. And again, I prefer to keep everything working as closely as it can to Dreamweaver standards, so I'm going to keep 2 lines checked here. And then we have some other miscellaneous options. By default, allow users to edit web page source and external application is unchecked. If you don't want users to be able to use something like Dreamweaver, you would leave that unchecked. If you don't want users to be able to add a Google search field or a PayPal button, leave that unchecked. If you don't want users to be able to hit the space bar multiple times while typing text, leave that unchecked. And generally, you do want to leave that option unchecked. Next, we have require alt text for images, which improves website accessibility. And I generally do want to keep that checked. That way, anytime the users insert an image, they'll be prompted to enter alternate text to describe the image, which will make it much easier for people with vision disabilities to understand what the image is. So you should keep that checked in most cases. Next, we have use strong and M or emphasis in place of B and I. This is essentially how the code is written when the user makes text either bold or italicized. Now, the B and the I tags, which are the older way of making text bold or italicized, have been deprecated by the World Wide Web Consortium. So it doesn't make sense to use them when strong and emphasis will do the same thing. So I definitely recommend that you keep this option checked as well. We also have allow HTML snippet insertion, which allows users to paste in little snippets of HTML. If you don't want them to do that, just leave this unchecked. And this line break type menu determines how the invisible characters that determine line breaks are written in the code. You generally don't have to worry about this setting, and you can leave it at its default selection, which is Windows. Next, we have the Styles and Fonts category. Under Style Support, you can choose to not let users create styles at all. You can choose to let them create document-level styles, or you can choose HTML tags. Since HTML styles are becoming obsolete, if you want Contribute to automatically generate CSS styles when users in this role are making formatting changes to text, you can choose document-level CSS. The rest of this category has to do with how users are allowed to view or apply styles. You can choose to include or exclude HTML heading styles. We generally do want to include those. We have include CSS styles in the style menu, which shows all CSS styles, or if only a few of the many CSS styles used in your site are relevant to this user group, you might want to choose only to give them access to styles on a certain style sheet only. And then we have other options for allowing users to apply font and sizes. If you want to give them the ability to change the font face or the size of text, you can leave that checked. You can determine the measurement used to determine the font size. And then you can choose to allow or disallow whether they can make text bold, italicized, underlined, and so on, and whether they can change the color of fonts or the background color. Next, we have the New Pages category, where you can determine whether these users are allowed to create a blank page, use built-in starter pages, create a new page by copying any page on the website, and we saw these all in action earlier when we were talking about the different ways to create new blank pages. Additionally, you can allow users to create new pages by copying another page from the website or another location, by choosing Create a New Page by copying a page from this list, and by selecting that, you can choose Add, and then you can browse through your websites to find a page to use as a starting point for anybody wanting to create a new page. And also selected by default is Use Dreamweaver Templates, which will list any templates that have been created in Dreamweaver on your site. You can choose to show users all templates or only show users these templates, and then you can move templates from one side to the other here. I only have one template, so it doesn't really matter in this case. But if you have a lot, you can restrict only certain user groups to see only certain templates. And by doing so, you can prevent one user group from creating pages based on templates from another section of your site. As we've seen in previous movies, Contribute automatically uploads things like images you place on your pages or other files you insert or link to from pages, and it moves these files to your web server. Under the File Placement category, you can specify where certain types of objects are placed on your web server. And you can see here that things like images, in fact all images, are automatically placed into a folder called Images at the same level of the page containing the images. Microsoft and PDF files are placed in a folder called Documents, again at the same level as the page you're working on, and all other files are just placed in the same folder as the page you're working on. As the site administrator, you probably want to stay a little more organized than this, so you can choose to edit the location of where each type of file is being published. So for instance, with all images selected, I can click Edit, and I have a couple options here as far as saving that to the same folder as the draft, to put it in a folder, in this case it's called Images, or to specify a folder that's already on the website. If anybody's going to add new images, I most likely already have a folder for images, so I'm going to choose to specify someplace on the tCloud site to upload images. And in this case, I have a folder called Assets, and in there is where the folder called Images is. So I'm going to select that. That way, anytime anybody adds a new image to the website, they'll be placed in the folder that I've already created for images, instead of having Contribute generate a new folder from scratch. Next, we have shared assets. And in the chapter on working with images, we saw that shared assets are images or other files that can be found in a single location, making it much easier for Contribute users to find the files they need to place into their pages. And shared assets are defined by the site administrator right here under the Shared Assets category. To add shared assets, just click Add, and you can choose whether you want to add an image, a Dreamweaver library item, or a Flash file. If I choose Image in this case, I can again browse through my site. I'll go into Assets, Images, and maybe I want to make sure that the tCloud logo is a shared image because I know that a lot of users will be using that image. It's kind of tiny in the preview here, but I know that's the right image, so I'll click on OK. Contribute tells me I can prevent users from editing this shared asset by changing the folder file access settings, which we already saw. I'll just go ahead and click on OK. Now, because under the editing category, we determined that we wanted to be prompted to add alternate text for adding images, I see this shared asset properties window pop up. It tells me the name of the file is logo, and I definitely want to add some alternate text here. And I'll just call this tcloud logo. That way, anybody using an Audible reader will be able to hear the word tcloud logo read to them, and they'll know what this image is right away. Click on OK. And there's my shared asset. And you would continue doing this for any image you want your users to have quick access to. And finally, we have new images. And here's where you can prevent users from adding that 4 megabyte photo they just pulled off their digital camera. But notice that the options here are grayed out, and it tells me here that users in this role can't insert new images. Now, if I go back to the editing category here, I can choose to allow unrestricted editing. Now, if I go back to new images, you can see that those options are now enabled. And I'll just leave them enabled now so we can talk about these different options. First of all, we can enable Contribute image processing when inserting images, so that if someone tries to publish an image that's larger than the maximum width, height, and quality settings listed here, Contribute will automatically compress the image before publishing it. Now, this is a good idea in a pinch because it prevents unnecessarily large files from being published to your web server, but it doesn't allow you any kind of control over the settings being used to recompress the published image, which may result in a bad-looking image. It's always better to optimize the image in a real image editing program like Photoshop or Fireworks first before making it available to your users. But it's still a good idea to have this option turned on here just in case someone tries to publish a large image. And of course, you can also just choose to completely reject any image that exceeds a certain file size by choosing that option and then entering a file size here in kilobytes. So these are the settings for each user role. It's up to you to determine what each group of users can and can't do on your website. After you've made all your changes here, you can click on OK, and the options you just selected will be all set for that user group. So I've now customized the permissions for the copy editor user role.